Hello, and thank you for joining me on my hobby adventure. I'm Dan, and this is Forlorn Hobbies. Welcome to episode 2 of Quick and Easy Painting, the series where we come up with stress-free, simple schemes that can help you get your minis on the table in no time. In this episode, we will be looking at painting the armour of foot knights from the War of the Roses, or from other European nations from this era. All paints will be from Citadel unless otherwise stated. However, there are conversion charts to help you match that paint to your preferred brand online. Before we begin painting, I have undercoated these minis using steel-forged silver rattle cans from Colourforge, before I then glue them to small MDF bases. Whilst I will be focusing on an individual model, I will also be painting up a number of others in the background. There will be 3 further plain armoured knights, and 2 that have surcoats on, that I will be later on in the video doing 2 different types of heraldic patterns as a walkthrough. To start off, we're going to use Nuln Oil to shade the whole miniature. Now this is to help emphasize the recesses and the details on the mini. Make sure you take care of pooling and just use a clean brush to soak up the excess. Once dry, we're going to take lead belcher and we're going to dry brush it all over the armour, just to emphasize those edges and add a bit of depth to the model. We're going to move on to painting the straps and gloves and boots and other little leather details on the miniature. For this we're going to use dry bark, and we're just going to apply it to those specific areas, just taking our time to make sure that we avoid getting any on the armour plates. To create a bit of difference to the leather areas, we will use Doomball Brown, and we will apply this to the scabbards and sheaths on the miniature. Bugman's flesh is then applied to the skin areas. This will mainly be the faces. However, only a small area could be visible depending on the helmet design of the mini. The final step before bringing it all together is to apply Retributor armour to the sword hilts and the metallic details on the scabbard. Now, although it is not strictly historically accurate for combat, I also add Retributor armour to a few armour plates on the model, just to make it a bit more busy and give it a little bit more character. This represents the brass edging that you might see on tournament armour and elaborate designs from that era. Now, to finish off the model on these basic stages, we're just going to apply an all-over wash of Agrax Earthshade. This will blend all the details together and give them a worn and gritty look Now, I've chosen to use a brown wash because I prefer the finish that it gives, but a black wash will do just as well, if that is what you prefer. Once the wash is dry, we can leave it there, or we can take an extra couple of steps just to bring it out that one step further. Firstly, we will return to the initial colour that we used for the skin, which is Bugman's flesh. This time, we will just look to layer it on to the raised areas. Now this is prominently going to be the chin and the cheekbones, unless the nose and the brows are visible on the mini. To take the skin just that little bit further, we're now going to take Kislev flesh and just highlight the most prominent raised features. Next we turn to the metal areas, including the gold. We're now going to dry brush very lightly with Leadbelcher just over the most prominent areas, just to give it that little bit of a shine. Finally, it is time to layer up the leather areas. Now, normally I would use Gothor Brown, but in this hot weather I found that my pot had dried out, so I did my best to mix the colours I had available, in this case Still Legion Drab and Giant Bark, to try and make a similar colour. However, I was not happy with the result, so I added a bit of Agrax Earthshade just to tone it down a little bit. But I would recommend just doing a simple layer of Gothor Brown. And with that, the mini is now finished. I will now move on to doing the first heraldic surcoat. Now, seeing as these minis are primarily for War of the Roses, where better than to start than with the fine son of York himself, the livery of the troops that followed Edward IV. We will follow the guide to start with of just painting a normal knight, up to the step prior to the Agrax Earthshade wash. Now at this point we will then do the following steps instead. Now, as we can see in the image, it is a red and blue halved shirt. So we're going to start off by taking Cantor Blue and painting the darker half of the uniform first, because that way any mistakes with the second one will be much easier to cover up. Now take your time and ensure that you have good control of your brush, especially when mapping out that center parting. Now we will repeat the process with the other half using corn red. Now we make sure that we take our time just to avoid covering the straps or going over the blue areas. If we make mistakes, we can just touch up with the initial colours of the areas if necessary. And now for the difficult part, to painting the emblem itself, the sun in splendour. For this we will use Avalan Sunset, and we start by just sketching out a circle in the centre of the livery, on the front and on the back. Just slowly blocking it out And then we're going to add the rays as if you were drawing a sun. Now it doesn't matter if you're not neat, because you can just use the red or the blue colours just to tidy it up later on. Now it's time to give the model an all-over wash of Agrax Earthshade. Make sure you watch for pooling, and if necessary, just mop it up with a clean brush. Once the wash is dry, we will now follow the main guide of painting the armour to its completion. Once we have done that, we will start to bring up the blue again. Now we will return to using Cantor blue, just to layer up the blue half of the surcoat, just to rebuild that warmth in colour, and just to emphasise the definition of the robes. Now we will return to corn red and repeat the process to the red half of the surcoat. Just remember to avoid the recesses, as we want to maintain a semblance of depth to the material. Finally, we will return to the yellow sun. Now we will use Avalan Sunset. I'd recommend using a smaller brush just for better control, where we re-emphasize the shape and build that colour up. And with that, the model is finished. If you want to, you could take it one further step on the surcoat by doing a fine layer of a lighter blue, a lighter red, and then highlighting the sun with a lighter yellow, but I do not think that that is necessary for a simple tabletop standard guide. For the second option, I thought we would go a little bit further afield and take inspiration from one of the examples provided by the Perry's information booklet in the box set. That is the livery of Grafen von Solz from the Holy Roman Empire. Now, we will follow the original guide all the way through until the final step, and then we will start painting the surcoat for this model. To start with, we will block out the surcoat on the Mini with grey cere. Now take extra care to avoid getting it on any other areas of the model. We will then cover the entire surcoat with apothecary white, taking our time to avoid the other areas of the model again. We will now use Blood Angel's Red to block out the design on the surcoat. I started by filling in the entirety of the bottom of the surcoat, before placing 3 dots just above halfway up the chest to represent the pinnacle of the triangular points. I then drew vertical lines down before slowly building out the areas to represent the pointed triangles of the design. I then did the same thing on the back of the model, before again moving on to the sleeves and repeating the process, taking care to avoid any other areas. Finally, I used Arctic White from Game Colour to block out the white areas, just layering them up just to emphasise that white colour, and also to clean up the sharp edges on the red points. This is the final result. Now we come to basing the Mini. Now, many people base in different ways, so instead of using my trusted base ready mix like I did in the previous one, I'm going to base using traditional sand and paint method. I'll start by applying PVA glue to the base. Any old shop PVA glue will work, and then just some kids play sand to scatter on to the base. I'll leave that to dry, and then when dry I'll mix up some shop craft acrylic paint because it's nice and cheap and I don't want to waste more expensive miniature paint on basing. Just thin it down with a bit of water and apply that to the base. I'll then use a couple of lighter browns and bone colours just to dry brush it up that sand before applying static grass. In this case I think I've used dead grass from WW Scenics that I got on Amazon, nice big bag, quite cheap, and then applying a couple of tufts just to round off the miniature. And now for a final reveal of all the models that I've painted using this guide. Now if there's anything that you would like to see a quick and easy guide for, please feel free to add it to the comments below, and I will consider adding it to the long list that I have in my mind to get to at some point. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy your hobby.